Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars. He had been a farmer once, growing corn and wheat on his family's land in Colorado. Now he was the captain of the Aurora's Edge, one of Earth's newest exploration ships. Life had a funny way of changing direction when you least expected it. The ship was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines. Jake's crew was small but good. Pete Rodriguez ran the engines and could fix anything that broke. Amy Chen was the best navigator Jake had ever worked with. Dr. Ben Carter took care of everyone's health and knew more about alien biology than most professors back on Earth. They had been mapping stars near the Kepler 442 system for 3 months. It was routine work, but Jake liked it. Every new star they cataloged was another step forward for humanity. Every planet they discovered might one day become home to Earth's children. The communication system beeped. Amy looked up from her station with surprise on her face. "Captain, we're getting a message," she said. "It's not from Earth. The signal is old, really old." Jake walked over to her station. "How old?" "The encoding suggests it's thousands of years old, but the message itself was sent recently. It's like someone used ancient technology to contact us." Pete joined them from the engine room, wiping grease from his hands. "What's going on?" "We got mail," Jake said. "Amy, can you put it on the main screen?" The message appeared in symbols that looked like nothing Jake had ever seen. They were beautiful and complex, like someone had turned mathematics into art. Then the symbols changed, becoming words in English. "To the representatives of humanity," the message began. "By order of the Galactic Federation High Council, your species has been selected for the Ascension Protocol. Captain Jake Sullivan of the vessel Aurora's Edge will report to the testing facility at the coordinates provided. The future of your species depends on your performance." The bridge fell silent. Jake read the message 3 times before speaking. "Well," he said, "that's not something you see every day." Dr. Carter had joined them and was reading over Jake's shoulder. "Galactic Federation? Are we talking about aliens here?" "Looks that way," Jake said. "Amy, how far are these coordinates?" Amy's fingers danced over her controls. "About 6 days at maximum speed. It's near a dying star system that we haven't explored yet." Jake thought about his options. He could ignore the message and continue their mission. He could report back to Earth and wait for orders. Or he could do what his gut told him to do. "Pete, how are our engines?" "Running perfect, Captain. We can make the trip no problem." "Amy, plot a course for those coordinates. Dr. Carter, send a message back to Earth letting them know what's happening." "Are we really going to meet aliens?" Pete asked. "Seems like it," Jake said. "And apparently they want to test us for something." The journey to the coordinates took exactly 6 days. As they got closer, Jake began to see things that made his farmer's mind struggle to understand. There were structures in space bigger than Earth's moon, rings of metal and crystal that caught the light of the dying star and threw it back in colors that had no names. "Captain," Amy said, her voice filled with wonder, "I'm reading artificial gravity fields, energy signatures I can't identify, and what looks like controlled pocket dimensions. This is technology beyond anything we've ever imagined." A new voice came over the communication system. It was musical and strange, like wind chimes made of crystal. "Captain Sullivan, welcome to the Ascension Testing Facility. I am Arbiter Withalan of the High Council. Please dock your vessel at the coordinates we are transmitting." Jake found his voice. "Thank you, Arbiter. This is quite a surprise for us. I am certain it is. Your species is young, but you have reached the level of development where testing becomes necessary. Please bring only essential crew members. The test will determine whether humanity is ready to join galactic civilization." The docking bay was huge and filled with ships Jake couldn't begin to understand. Some looked like living creatures made of metal. Others seemed to be built from pure energy held in geometric shapes. The Aurora's Edge looked like a child's toy next to them. Arbiter Ytholan met them at the airlock. It was hard to tell if the being was male or female or something else entirely. Its body was made of what looked like living crystal that changed colors as it moved. When it spoke, the crystals chimed softly. "Captain Sullivan, Dr. Carter, Navigator Chen, Engineer Rodriguez. You are welcome here." The alien's English was perfect. "I must tell you that this test has been given to 847 species over the past 3,000 years. "How many passed?" Jake asked. The crystal being's colors shifted to what might have been sadness. "None," Pete whistled softly. "None? What happens to the species that fail?" "They are restricted from accessing certain technologies. and cannot become full members of the galactic community. They are not harmed, but they cannot advance beyond their current level of development. Dr. Carter stepped forward. What exactly does this test involve? You will be placed in a scenario that tests your wisdom, judgment, and moral clarity. The situation will seem very real, but it is a simulation. You must make choices that will determine not just your own fate, but the fate of all humanity. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Back on the farm, the biggest decision he made was when to plant the corn. Now he was supposed to make choices for his entire species. How long do I have to prepare? He asked. No preparation is allowed. The test begins immediately. Your crew will observe, but they cannot help you. You must face this alone, as every candidate before you has done. Amy touched Jake's arm. Captain, you don't have to do this. We could go back to Earth and let someone else take the test. Jake shook his head. No, we're here and they chose us for a reason. Maybe it's because I'm just a farmer from Colorado who happened to become a ship captain. Maybe that's exactly what they need. Arbiter Wythalon led them through corridors filled with technology that looked like magic. Other aliens watched them pass. Some had too many eyes, others had no eyes at all. Some floated, others crawled, and a few looked almost human except for details that reminded Jake they were very far from home. The testing chamber is ahead, Ythalon said. Captain Sullivan, once you enter, the simulation will begin. Remember, every choice you make will have consequences. Choose wisely. Jake looked back at his crew one last time, then stepped into the chamber. The door closed behind him with a sound like distant thunder, and suddenly he was somewhere else entirely. Jake found himself standing on the bridge of a massive space station. Through the windows, he could see Earth floating in the darkness below. It looked exactly like home, blue and white and beautiful. But something was terribly wrong. Ships surrounded Earth. Thousands of them. Maybe tens of thousands. They were dark and angular, nothing like any human design Jake had ever seen. As he watched, bright flashes appeared on Earth's surface. Cities were burning. Captain Sullivan. A voice spoke behind him. Jake turned to see a man in a military uniform he didn't recognize. The man's face was grim. The situation is critical. The enemy fleet arrived 6 hours ago and began attacking population centers immediately. Jake felt his heart racing. How many casualties? Current estimates are approaching 50 million dead, sir. The attacks are systematic. They're targeting major cities first, then moving to smaller population centers. At this rate, Earth will be uninhabitable within 12 hours. Jake moved to the window and pressed his hands against the glass. He could see the flashes of light where his home planet was dying. Somewhere down there, people were running and screaming and dying. Children who would never grow up. Families torn apart forever. What about evacuations? Jake asked. Impossible, sir. Our transport capacity can handle maybe a few thousand people. There are 8 billion humans on Earth. The military officer moved to a control panel that Jake hadn't noticed before. It was covered in lights and switches, but at the center was a single red button under a clear cover. Sir, you have command of the Omega weapon. It's the most powerful device ever created. One activation will destroy the entire enemy fleet instantly. Jake walked over to the control panel. What's the catch? The officer's face grew even more grim. The weapon draws its power from Earth's sun. Activating it will cause a solar flare that could damage Earth's atmosphere. There's a 30% chance the planet will become uninhabitable anyway. 30%? Yes, sir. But if we don't use the weapon, Earth will definitely be destroyed within hours. The enemy ships have some kind of shield technology. Our conventional weapons can't touch them. Jake stared at the red button. In his mind, he could hear the voices of everyone he'd ever known back on Earth. His sister Lisa, who taught school in Denver. His old neighbor Frank, who'd helped him harvest corn every fall for 20 years. Pete's family in Texas, Amy's parents in California. Ben's wife and kids in Florida. Have we tried to communicate with them? Jake asked. Communicate, sir? The attacking ships. Have we tried to talk to them? Find out what they want? The officer looked confused. Sir, they're destroying our planet. What more do we need to know? Jake walked around the control panel, studying it from different angles. Something felt wrong about the whole situation. Not just wrong like a bad situation, but wrong like a puzzle with missing pieces. How did they get past our defenses so easily? He asked. Sir, we need to make a decision. Every minute we wait, more people die. Jake looked out the window again. The flashes of light seemed to be coming faster now. More cities burning. More lives ending. Show me our defensive positions, Jake said. Sir? Our ships, our stations, our defenses. Show me where they are. The officer touched some controls and a holographic display appeared. It showed Earth surrounded by the attacking fleet, but Jake couldn't see any human defenses at all. Where are our forces? They were destroyed in the first wave of attacks, sir. This station is all that remains, Jake frowned. In all his years studying space warfare tactics, he'd never heard of a defensive strategy that put all the important people on a single station with no backup plans. It was like building a castle with no walls and putting all the nobles in one tower. Who built this weapon? Jake asked. I don't have that information, sir. Please, we're running out of time. Jake walked back to the window. The Earth below looked real enough. The burning cities looked real. The enemy ships looked real. But the more questions he asked, the less sense anything made. He thought about his time as a farmer. When crops started dying, you didn't just guess at the problem and hope for the best. You looked at the soil, checked the weather, examined the plants themselves. You asked questions until you understood what was really happening. I need more information, Jake said. Sir, there is no more time for information. You have 3 choices. Use the weapon and probably save Earth. Don't use the weapon and definitely lose Earth. Or surrender to the enemy and hope they show mercy. Jake almost laughed. When he was farming, people used to come by and try to sell him solutions to problems he didn't even have. They always made everything sound urgent and simple. Buy now or lose everything. Act fast or miss your chance forever. What if there's a 4th choice? Jake asked. Sir? What if the real problem isn't what we think it is? The officer was getting frustrated. Jake could see it in his face. Captain Sullivan, I need you to make a decision. Use the weapon, surrender, or watch Earth die. Jake looked at the red button again. It would be so easy to push it. One quick motion and maybe Earth would be safe. But maybe it would be destroyed anyway. And maybe there was something else going on that he didn't understand yet. How long have you been fighting this enemy? Jake asked. They just arrived 6 hours ago, sir? No, I mean your people. How long have your people been fighting them? The officer hesitated for just a moment. This is their first attack on Earth, sir. Jake caught the hesitation. But not their first attack on anyone? Another hesitation. They have attacked other worlds, yes. How many other worlds? Sir, please. We need to focus on saving Earth. Jake realized that every question he asked was making the officer more uncomfortable. It was like the man had prepared for certain questions, but not others. I need to think about this, Jake said. There's no time to think. Sir? Look. The officer pointed out the window. The flashes on Earth's surface were getting brighter and more frequent. If this was real, millions more people were dying while Jake stood there asking questions. But something deep in his gut told him that pushing the red button was exactly the wrong thing to do. His father had always told him to trust that feeling, especially when people were trying to rush him into big decisions. Jake stepped away from the control panel and sat down in a chair facing the window. If he was going to be responsible for the fate of humanity, he was going to make sure he understood what he was really deciding. I'm not pushing that button until I know what's really going on here, he said. The officer's face turned red. Sir, you're condemning Earth to destruction. Maybe, Jake said. Or maybe I'm refusing to fall for something that's not what it appears to be. Jake settled back in his chair and started thinking like a farmer again. When you don't understand a problem, you start with what you know for sure and work from there. And the first thing Jake knew for sure was that this whole situation felt like someone was trying to sell him something he didn't need. Jake sat in his chair for what felt like hours, watching Earth burn below. The officer kept trying to get him to make a decision, but Jake ignored him. He was thinking. The more he thought, the more things didn't add up. If this enemy was so powerful, why hadn't they just destroyed the space station too? If the weapon was so important, why was a farmer turned ship captain the only one who could use it? If the situation was so urgent, why did he have time to sit here and think? Computer, Jake said suddenly. Yes, Captain? A voice answered. Display enemy ship specifications. I'm sorry, Captain. That information is not available. Display our ship specifications. I'm sorry, Captain. That information is not available. Display weapon specifications. I'm sorry, Captain. That information is not available. Jake smiled for the first time since entering the simulation. Display communications array status. Communications array is offline, Captain. Why is it offline? Damaged in the initial attack, Captain. Jake stood up and walked to the communication station. It looked perfect to him. No damage, no burn marks, no missing pieces. He started pressing buttons. "Sir, what are you doing?" the officer asked. "Trying to fix our communications," Jake said. "If we can talk to these aliens, maybe we can figure out what they want without destroying Earth." "Sir, the communications are irreparably damaged." Jake found what he was looking for. A manual override that should let him broadcast on emergency frequencies. He flipped the switch. "This is Captain Jake Sullivan of Earth to any ship that can hear this message. We would like to communicate. Please respond." Nothing happened for a moment. Then the entire simulation started to flicker. The officer's face changed, becoming less solid somehow. "Sir, you need to stop that immediately." "Why?" Jake asked, pressing more buttons. "If they can understand our surrender, they should be able to understand our questions." The scene outside the window began to glitch. Some of the enemy ships disappeared for a second, then reappeared in different positions. The flashes of light on Earth started happening in a pattern that was too regular to be random attacks. "Sir, you're interfering with critical systems." Jake ignored him and kept working on the communications array. He managed to boost the signal and tried again. "This is Captain Jake Sullivan. We want to understand why you're attacking Earth. What do you want from us? Can we negotiate?" The simulation flickered harder. Through the static, Jake thought he heard something. Voices maybe, or music. It sounded almost familiar. Suddenly, the space station vanished. Jake found himself standing in a small white room with Arbiter Ytholan. The crystal being's colors were shifting rapidly between what looked like confusion and amazement. "Captain Sullivan," Ytholan said. "You broke the simulation, did I?" Jake asked. "Good, it was a lousy simulation anyway. I don't understand. You were supposed to choose between using the weapon, surrendering, or allowing Earth to be destroyed. Every species makes one of those choices." Jake sat down on the floor. The white room was kind of comfortable, actually. "What if those aren't the only choices?" "I don't understand," Ytholan repeated. "Look, I'm just a farmer from Colorado. But I know when someone's trying to sell me something I don't need. That whole situation was designed to make me panic and choose fast. Nobody makes good decisions when they're panicked." The crystal being's colors shifted to something that might have been interest. "What do you mean?" "Well, first off, why was I the only one who could operate the weapon? That's like saying only one person on Earth can drive a tractor. It doesn't make sense. Second, why were the communications conveniently broken in a way that looked like they worked but didn't? Third, why didn't the enemy attack the space station if they were really trying to destroy everything?" Jake stood up and started pacing around the small room. But the biggest problem was that nobody in the whole scenario seemed interested in finding out what the aliens actually wanted. They just assumed it was a fight to the death with no other options. "You tried to communicate with the enemy ships," Ytholan observed. "Of course I did. Back home, when a neighbor's cows get into your field, you don't shoot the cows. You go talk to your neighbor and figure out how to fix the fence. Most problems have solutions that don't involve someone dying." Ytholan was quiet for a long moment. The colors in its crystalline body shifted through patterns Jake hadn't seen before. "Captain Sullivan, in 3,000 years of testing, you are the first candidate to question the fundamental premise of the scenario." "What premise?" "That the situation requires you to choose between bad options. Every other species has accepted that the scenario is real and made their choice based on their values. The Xanthari chose to use the weapon because they valued their own species above all others. The Vexani chose to surrender because their logic said it gave the best odds of survival. The Corvani chose to let their people die because they believed suffering was spiritually necessary." Jake shook his head. "But the whole thing was fake, right? So their choices didn't actually save or doom anyone. They were just showing you how they think." "Exactly. And how I think is that when someone gives you only bad choices, you should probably look for better ones." Ytholan's colors shifted again. "Captain Sullivan, what if I told you that your response has created a problem for the Galactic Federation?" "What kind of problem?" "For 3,000 years, we have used this test to determine which species are wise enough for full galactic citizenship. The test has worked perfectly. Every species has revealed their true nature under pressure." Jake thought about that. "But what if the test itself is the problem?" "I don't understand. You built a test that only offers bad choices. Then you act surprised when people make bad choices. What if the species that failed weren't actually showing their true nature? What if they were just responding to a badly designed situation?" The room fell silent. Jake could almost hear Ytholan thinking, which was weird since he didn't think crystal beings had brains that made noise. Captain Sullivan, are you suggesting that our test is flawed? I'm saying that if you want to know how someone handles real problems, you should give them real problems to solve, not fake emergencies designed to make them panic. Ytholan moved closer to Jake. Up close, the crystal being was even more beautiful, like a living rainbow made of stone. What you're proposing would require us to completely rethink our approach to evaluating species for galactic citizenship. Jake shrugged. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. How's the current approach working out for you? You've got 847 species that failed your test. That seems like a lot of failure for such a perfect system. The species that failed simply weren't ready for the responsibilities of advanced technology. Or maybe they just weren't ready for your particular test. There's a difference. Ytholan was quiet again. Jake waited. Back on the farm, he'd learned that sometimes the best thing to do was plant an idea and give it time to grow. Finally, Ytholan spoke. Captain Sullivan, would you be willing to discuss your proposal with the full High Council? Sure, Jake said. But I should probably tell you something first. What? I'm really not qualified to speak for all of humanity. I'm just one guy who got lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. If you want to know what humans are really like, you should probably meet more of us. Ytholan's colors shifted to what definitely looked like amusement. Captain Sullivan, I suspect you are more qualified than you think. The High Council chamber was the most impressive room Jake had ever seen. It was built inside what looked like a hollow crystal the size of a stadium. Representatives from dozens of species sat in floating chairs arranged in circles that rose up toward a domed ceiling that showed the stars beyond. Jake stood in the center with his crew beside him. Pete kept looking around with his mouth open. Amy was taking notes on everything she saw. Dr. Carter was trying to count how many different types of aliens were present. Arbiter Ytholan floated near the top of the chamber. When it spoke, its voice echoed from every surface. Honored Council, we are here to discuss the unprecedented result of humanity's Ascension Protocol test. Captain Jake Sullivan of Earth has challenged the fundamental structure of our testing system. A being that looked like a tree made of silver spoke first. Arbiter Ytholan, the testing system has served us well for 3 millennia. One species questioning our methods hardly seems grounds for wholesale change. Another voice came from a creature that was mostly tentacles and eyes. The human broke the simulation through what appears to be simple stubbornness. This suggests a dangerous unwillingness to accept reality. Jake stepped forward. Permission to speak? Granted, Ytholan said. I didn't break your simulation because I was stubborn. I broke it because it was designed to break. You built a test that only works if people don't ask questions. A chorus of sounds came from around the chamber. Some might have been laughter. Others might have been anger. Jake couldn't tell the difference yet. A new voice spoke, this one from a being that looked like it was made of living water. Human, our test has successfully identified species that value power over wisdom, logic over compassion, and ideology over practical solutions. How is this not useful? Because you're not testing those things, Jake said. You're testing how people react to panic and artificial pressure. That's not the same thing. Dr. Carter stepped up beside Jake. If I may add something, in medical research we call this testing artifact. When your testing method changes the thing you're trying to measure, your results become meaningless. The silver tree being spoke again. Explain, Dr. Carter took a deep breath. The captain is right. Your test doesn't measure wisdom or morality. It measures how species respond to deliberately stressful scenarios designed to limit their options. That's like testing someone's cooking ability by only letting them use broken tools in a burning kitchen. Amy joined them. From a navigation perspective, you're testing people's ability to make decisions while deliberately withholding the information they need to make good decisions. No navigator would choose a course without checking all available data first. Pete was the last to speak. And from an engineering standpoint, you've built a system that's designed to fail. When something breaks this often, you don't blame the users. You redesign the system. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices. Some were clearly angry, others seemed intrigued. Jake waited for the noise to die down. Honored Council, Ytholan said when quiet returned. The humans have made serious accusations about our testing methods. Perhaps we should examine their claims more carefully. The being made of water spoke again. What evidence do you have that our method is flawed? Jake looked up at the assembled aliens. You've tested 847 species over 3,000 years and not one of them passed. Doesn't that seem like a lot of failure for one test? It proves that most species aren't ready for galactic citizenship, the Silver Tree said. Or it proves that your test doesn't measure what you think it measures, Jake replied. Let me ask you something. Of all the species that failed your test, how many have gone on to cause problems in the galaxy? The chamber fell silent. Jake could see aliens looking at each other, which was interesting since many of them didn't have faces. Finally, a new voice spoke. It came from a being that looked almost human except for the extra arms and the golden skin. Records indicate that 97% of species that failed the Ascension Protocol have remained peaceful members of the galactic community at their current access level. 97%, Jake repeated. So almost every species you rejected as too dangerous or unwise has actually been peaceful and stable. That proves the system works, the tentacled being said. By limiting their access to dangerous technologies, we prevented problems. Or, Amy said, it proves that these species were never dangerous to begin with. You've been solving a problem that didn't exist. The golden-skinned being spoke again. Furthermore, recent analysis suggests that many of the species classified as failed have developed innovative solutions to galactic challenges without access to restricted technologies. Dr. Carter nodded. They've been succeeding despite your restrictions, not because of them. Ytholan's colors were shifting rapidly now. Council, if the humans are correct, then we have been systematically excluding species that could have contributed to galactic civilization. Impossible, the Silver Tree said. The test has been validated by our greatest minds. Jake smiled. Has it? Or have your greatest minds just been telling you what you wanted to hear for 3,000 years? The chamber erupted again. This time, Jake could distinguish between different types of alien arguing. Some were clearly defending the old system, while others seemed to be questioning it for the first time. When the noise died down, the golden-skinned being spoke. Human Captain, what alternative do you propose? Stop testing species in isolation with fake emergencies. Instead, invite them to work on real problems alongside species that are already members. Judge them by how they collaborate, not by how they panic. That's impossible, the tentacled being said. How can we trust unproven species with real galactic challenges? Pete stepped forward. Start small. Give them problems that won't end the galaxy if they mess up. See how they work with others. Build trust over time instead of demanding it all at once. This approach would require fundamental changes to our admission process, Ytholan observed. Maybe that's exactly what you need, Jake said. How many great ideas have you missed because you were too busy testing species instead of working with them? The water being spoke thoughtfully. There is precedent for this approach. Many of our current member species began as collaborators on minor projects before achieving full citizenship. But that was before we developed the Ascension Protocol, the Silver Tree argued. And maybe that's when we started making mistakes, the golden-skinned being said. I vote to hear more of the human proposal. Around the chamber, more voices joined in. Some supported hearing Jake's ideas. Others wanted to maintain the current system. The debate went on for hours. Finally, Ytholan called for order. Council, we have heard compelling arguments from both sides. I propose a compromise. The chamber fell silent. Let humanity prove their approach by tackling a real galactic challenge. If their methods succeed, we will consider revising our testing protocols. If they fail, we will maintain our current system. What challenge? The Silver Tree asked. The Helix Nebula disappearances, Ytholan said. Ships have been vanishing in that region for decades. No species has been able to solve the mystery. If the humans can succeed where others have failed, using their collaborative approach, it will prove the value of their methods. Jake felt his stomach tighten. They'd gone from taking a test to being responsible for solving a mystery that had stumped an entire galactic civilization. What do you say, Captain Sullivan? Ytholan asked. Jake looked at his crew. Pete gave him a thumbs up. Amy nodded confidently. Dr. Carter smiled and shrugged as if to say, why not? We'll take the challenge, Jake said. But we do it our way, with mixed crews, open communication, and no artificial deadlines. Agreed, Ytholan said. The future of galactic civilization may depend on your success. No pressure, Pete muttered, but he was grinning when he said it. 3 weeks later, Jake found himself on the bridge of a ship unlike anything he'd ever imagined. The Federation had provided them with a vessel designed by 6 different species, combining the best technology from each. Pete was in engineering heaven, working alongside a Zenthari engineer who could literally see mechanical stress patterns. Amy shared navigation duties with a Vexani whose mathematical abilities made human computers look slow. Dr. Carter had partnered with a Corvani healer who could sense biological distress from across a solar system. The Helix Nebula floated before them like a cosmic storm frozen in time. Bands of colorful gas twisted around each other in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Somewhere in that beautiful, dangerous maze, ships had been disappearing for 40 years. Status report, Jake said. Amy looked up from her station. We're at the edge of the disappearance zone. Sensors show normal space on this side, but readings get weird about 1,000 kilometers in. Her Vexani partner, a being called Keltar whose name sounded like crystal bells ringing, added more detail. Probability matrices suggest the disappearances follow a pattern, but the pattern shifts every 73.6 days in ways that defy predictable mathematics. Pete's voice came from engineering. Captain, the drives are running perfect. But Vorgan wants to know if we should expect any unusual gravitational effects. Vorgan was the Zenthari engineer, a 7-foot-tall warrior whose people had once tried to conquer half the galaxy before failing their ascension test. Now he spent his time building things instead of breaking them, and Pete said he was the best engineer he'd ever met. Dr. Carter, what's the medical situation? All crew members are healthy and showing no signs of stress. Lyramoth says the energy patterns in the nebula are unlike anything in her species' records, but they don't appear immediately dangerous to biological life. Lyramoth was their Corvani partner, a being that looked like a cross between a deer and a butterfly. Her people believed that suffering was sacred, which had led them to choose martyrdom in their test. Working with Dr. Carter, she was learning that preventing suffering could be sacred too. Jake studied the displays showing their planned route into the nebula. Previous expeditions had followed careful, logical paths based on sensor readings and mathematical models. Every one of them had vanished without a trace. Keltar, show me the disappearance locations again. The Vexani's fingers danced over controls that looked like they were made of liquid light. A holographic display appeared showing the nebula with red dots marking where ships had last been detected. Computer, overlay the search patterns used by previous expeditions. Blue lines appeared on the display, showing the routes that the missing ships had taken. They were all neat, organized, and logical. Jake stared at the display for a long time. Something was bothering him, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Amy, what would you do if you were trying to hide something in this nebula? Hide it where people wouldn't think to look, she said immediately. Where wouldn't people think to look? Amy studied the display. Well, all the search patterns avoid the densest gas clouds. Sensors can't penetrate them effectively, so everyone assumes there's nothing worth finding there. Keltar's crystalline voice chimed in. Logical assumption. Dense gas clouds would interfere with any technology we know of. But what if someone had technology we don't know about? Dr. Carter asked from the medical station. Pete's voice came over the intercom again. Captain, Vorgan just made an interesting point. He says his people once hid entire fleets in sensor dead zones during their war period. Said it worked because their enemies always looked where they expected to find things. Jake felt pieces clicking together in his mind. Lyramoth, have your people ever encountered anything that deliberately avoided contact? Many times, came the gentle reply. Not all beings wish to be found. Some prefer solitude for reasons others cannot understand. What if, Jake said slowly, what if we're not looking for wreckage or pirates or some kind of natural phenomenon? What if we're looking for someone who doesn't want to be found? The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the engines and the soft sounds of different species breathing. That would explain why the pattern keeps changing, Amy said. If something intelligent is causing the disappearances, it would adapt to our search methods. But why take ships? Keltar asked. If a being wished to remain hidden, why not simply hide more effectively? Jake thought about that. Back on the farm, when wild animals kept getting into the grain storage, the solution wasn't always to build higher fences. Sometimes you had to figure out why they were coming around in the first place. What if they're not taking ships maliciously? What if they're protecting something? Protecting what? Dr. Carter asked. I don't know yet, but let's change our approach. Instead of searching for where ships disappeared, let's search for what might be worth protecting in this nebula. Over the next several hours, they ran every scan they could think of. Instead of looking for danger or wreckage, they looked for anything unusual. Anything that might be valuable or important enough to guard. It was Lyramoth who found it. "Captain." Her voice was filled with wonder. "Deep in the central gas cloud, I'm detecting life signs. Not just life. Massive amounts of life, and the energy pattern suggests something very old." Jake felt his heart rate increase. "How old?" "Millions of years, possibly. And, Captain, I think it's trying to communicate." The signal was faint, almost lost in the cosmic background radiation. But when they filtered out the interference, a pattern emerged. It was complex and beautiful, like music made of mathematics. "It's a warning," Amy said suddenly. "Look at the transmission pattern. It's telling us to stay away." "Not stay away," Keltar corrected. "Be careful." The mathematical structures suggest caution rather than hostility. Jake made a decision that went against every regulation in the book. "Open a channel." "All frequencies, Captain." Pete's voice was uncertain. "We came here to solve a mystery by doing things differently. Let's talk to whatever's out there." Jake took a deep breath. "This is Captain Jake Sullivan of the Joint Federation vessel Hope's Promise. We know you're there and we know you've been protecting something. We don't want to hurt or disturb anything. We just want to understand what's happening to the ships that come here." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the signal pattern changed, becoming more complex and somehow more interested. A new voice came over the speakers, ancient and vast and sad. "Young travelers, we are the guardians of the Helix. We have protected the nursery for eons beyond your counting. Ships that enter carelessly are redirected to safety. We do not harm, but we do not allow disturbance of the growing ones." "The growing ones?" Dr. Carter asked. "Life," Lyramoth whispered. "The entire center of the nebula is a nursery for some kind of life form," the ancient voice continued. "You are the first to ask permission, the first to show respect. For this, we will show you truth." The view screen lit up with an image that took Jake's breath away. In the heart of the nebula, vast crystalline structures were growing, each one larger than Earth's moon. They pulsed with their own light and moved with slow, graceful purpose. "They're alive," Amy breathed. "They are the young ones," the Guardian said. "They have grown here for millions of your years. In another million years, they will be ready to seed new galaxies with life. We protect them until that time." Jake understood now. "You've been moving ships away to protect your charges." "Yes, most who come here seek to claim or study or exploit. We relocate them to safe distances with no memory of what they have seen. But you asked first. You showed wisdom. Where are the ships you relocated? Safe, unharmed. They believe they suffered navigation failures and returned to known space. We do not harm those who do not understand." Jake looked around at his mixed crew. They had solved the mystery not by fighting or analyzing or forcing their way through, but by asking questions and showing respect. "Guardian," Jake said, "would you be willing to establish formal communication with the Federation? There are others who would respect your mission and help protect the nursery. You believe your people would understand." Jake thought about the High Council, about species that had been excluded for centuries, about the potential for cooperation instead of testing. "I think we're all still learning how to understand each other, but yes, I believe they would try." 6 months later, Jake stood in the High Council chamber again. This time, he wasn't alone in the center. Representatives from the Helix Guardians floated beside him, along with engineers from successful Federation species collaboration projects throughout the galaxy. Arbiter Wytholan's colors shifted through what Jake had learned was deep satisfaction. The collaborative integration process has exceeded all expectations. 17 species previously classified as failed have been elevated to full Federation membership. The Helix Nursery is now under joint protection, and 3 new galactic challenges are being addressed by mixed species teams. The Silver Tree being, who had been one of the strongest opponents to changing the system, spoke with what might have been embarrassment. "The Federation acknowledges that our previous testing methods were inadequate." Jake smiled. "They weren't inadequate. They just weren't designed for what you actually needed to measure."